All right. And thank you, listeners out there tuning in to us to spread the word on Friday night. And bless you, radio family. Tonight we have a very special guest coming on the show. We have Josh Sigurdson. Josh is a go-getter, let me tell you. He is the founder and director and journalist for World Alternative Media. He's a writer at We Are Change. He's a co-founder at Winnipeg Alternative Media. He lives in Canada. He is a younger guy, very strong advocate for freedom and liberty, which is very hopeful, and that's why I was very excited to get Josh on the show. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
You bet. Thank you for coming on. It's always inspiring to me to see somebody in the younger generation who is awake. So, and I know that you like to talk a lot about not only liberty and freedom, but our monetary system. And worldwide, it's ridiculous. Recently, I saw that you had Ron Paul on your show, and so let's talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, I guess that was a heart attack waiting to happen because the man woke me up when I was, around 12 years old. I was a bit of a Marxist, I have to admit, which belongs to childhood. I mean, that's natural. But anyway, I watched him in the debates in, I think, 2007 going into 2008, and the man changed my life forever. I started reading into economics, markets, learning about why the problem can't be solved from government or by government, but the problem is the government. And it set me on a path that I never looked back on. But having Ron Paul, sitting there, being able to interview him was one of the most incredible moments in my career as a reporter and a journalist, because he is someone who has just changed the entire political world by shaking so many people free of these chains they so revere. And being able to talk with him was truly incredible.
That is incredible, because that's one of my celebrities right there. You know, I don't know these people that live in Hollywood. I have no idea what goes on in their lives, but people like Ron Paul, oh my gosh, he's definitely a hero. And I would say that man is basically like, he has to be reincarnated from Thomas Jefferson or somebody.
I'd say. Absolutely. Well, and he's far from just, talking about politics and all that, but the monetary system, which is so important to all of us, because I mean, it's something that affects every single one of us today. And most people don't even know what money is. People see a fiat bill and they say, that's money. Well, it certainly is not. It's currency. It's not money, though. Money must hold a store of value, or actually be based on the demand of the individual, and should be scarce enough to perpetually at least go up in value or on a sideways trajectory. But instead, under legal tender laws, we have this fiat currency enforced on us. And when that happens, they print amazing amounts out of thin air. It creates inflation, devalues a currency, and, of course, creates vast amounts of debt, which is met with more debt. It's that Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, repeat, where they just keep printing and printing to make up for printing too much. And I think that it's so important that people understand what true value is, because there's nothing the government and the banking system wants more than for us to be in debt, because as I so often mention, it's like throwing us down a bottomless pit of debt, and we're forced to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, and that puts us in perfect servitude.
That's right. That's exactly right. And people don't realize that inflation, taxation, recessions, depressions, bubbles, and bailouts are all the banks. This is what's enslaving us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a mixture of the banks and government, which are the two greatest evils of all time, the mixture of the both working together, government monopolizing the banking system, banking basically taking over government. It's something that works hand in hand, and we see massive amounts of derivatives. We see massive amounts of market manipulation. I mean, just even with gold and silver. I mean, gold and silver is wealth insurance. It's prevailed for millennia. It's actually something that preserves value. But what we've seen over the last several years is these paper ETFs that they throw out there because, of course, gold and silver don't fluctuate at the level that a lot of investors like. So in order to make a bit of a profit off of it, they fluctuate the value. Deutsche Bank was caught last year twice manipulating the gold and silver markets. While it's in a bull market, so it should be going up, it's in an artificial bear market, so it's perpetually either staying level or going down. And this is an attack on our individual liberties, because as the fiat currency is printed out of thin air, one of the most incredible ways that people can take care of themselves and ensure their wealth is with gold and silver. But they are manipulating these markets, monopolizing them into the hands of the banking system, and this is something that we should all be quite concerned about. Now, with that said, when that fiat empire comes crashing down, which it inevitably will, gold and silver will lose the chains that are holding it up by the banking system. So we are going to see a massive rally in the value of gold and silver. But with that said, first we have to have that fiat crash, and the fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the fiat system. So we can't actually put a date on it. We just know it's going to happen. So it makes us all very uneasy because we can't, prepare for this day. We just know it's going to happen, and we could find out 4 or 5 days ahead of time that, it's going to crash, and then we're done. We need time to be able to figure this out, but we won't have that time, which is why people should really look into ensuring their wealth today rather than tomorrow, because it can happen at any point. Look, the fiat system has been around since 1024 AD in China. Over 1,000 years, over 600 fiat currencies have crashed, and yet we don't learn. But it's because they make the system sound more complicated than it is. The monetary system is very basic. It's very easy to understand, but they make it sound more complex than it really is, and it scares people away from looking into it. Some people will say it's boring. Other people will say it sounds like another language, when really they just think up the most crazy words to explain the most simple scenarios. Basically, you centrally plan a currency, and it will be destroyed because you are taking out the individual demand, and therefore it's just based on the faith. So with gold and silver, there's not a lot of gold on this planet. So it always has scarcity, which means it always has demand, because as long as it's scarce, there isn't a lot of it, people will flock to it. But fiat is centrally planned, it's controlled, manipulated, and printed out of thin air, so there isn't scarcity and there isn't demand. And as countries around the world start taking in massive amounts of gold and pulling away from the US dollar, we're going to see a massive monetary event happen in the near future that's nothing like anything we've seen in human history. But with that said, there's also a lot of work going on at the IMF to make this situation that much worse for us with their special drawing rights. So the SDR is basically the world currency to be. And this isn't conspiracy theory. They openly talk about how they want to incorporate centrally planned cashless system, cashless currency into the SDR. And that is alarming, because if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the bank through digital transactions and you never hold it in your hand, it's never your money, it's always the bank's, and it's via the hand of government. It's government decree, legal tender laws, which means that you are enslaved to the banking system and the government. And if people aren't concerned about this, it's about time they start getting concerned, because they need to be able to protect themselves. There's solutions to all these problems. We are able to protect ourselves, but we need to know the problem and call it by its name before we can solve the problem.
Exactly. And so tell us a little bit about what are some of the solutions that you see? And do you believe this is going to be a worldwide crash, or do you think it's going to be North America crash? I think it's going to be, well, for sure in the United States, and it's going to be horrible. I think it's going to affect the whole world.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is going to be a global crash, because the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency. And with that said, trade throughout the world is based on it. And actually, a lot of other countries' currencies are based on the U.S. dollar, including Zimbabwe, who had a hyperinflation a few years ago. And we saw homeless people that had trillions of dollars because the paper turned to nothing. Right now, what we're watching is the United States, the Federal Reserve, is attempting to raise interest rates. They're slowly trying to move interest rates up because when they do that, they can move them down when the economy is ready to crash. They can manipulate it into maybe prolonging the crash to a later date, which is what they've done historically. So when you see them trying to edge interest rates just a little bit up so that they can drop them out after, then we should really be concerned. But it won't work this time because they can't jack it up enough. There's no way for this to not end with an absolute desecration of the U.S. dollar. And that means worldwide you're going to see a crash that's on an epic scale. We're looking at similar things happening in China, where there's a lot of power shift moving to China, including the IMF, which just announced a few days ago that they plan to move their headquarters to Beijing. There's a big power shift going in that direction. Lots of gold over there. They're capitalizing on the centrally planned cashless system. But solutions are important. So when it comes to solutions, I always say food, water, shelter, defense, or else you're just gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. And, of course, you have to be self-sufficient. You have to be able to take care of yourself, which is rare these days because the way the college system works, the way the public school system works, they push us away from self-sufficiency into dependency. So that has been part of an agenda for a long time in the making. But I would say that you should do your best to actually know how to take care of yourself without the hand of government or someone else doing it for you. And then, of course, comes sound money. Now, people can say, well, you can't eat gold. Well, of course you can't. You need that currency in order to pay for things so you're not having to hunt every single day, which is not realistic. Most people today, especially living in cities, don't know how to hunt. And you can't harvest crops on a daily basis so you could feed yourself. So the only realistic way of going at it is having something, in the olden days, it would have been spears, it would have been knives, whatever. Today it's guns. You have to be able to also have gold and silver so that you can pay for things instead of resorting to stealing or killing for it, which historically happens in a massive dollar crash. I mean, we're seeing that in Venezuela right now. We need to be prepared and be able to take care of ourselves and have something of value.
And how long do you think we'll have to be prepared for? Like 3 months, a year, 2 years, what?
Well, this could go either way. I mean, again, historically, though we haven't seen anything on the scale of what we're going to see in the near future, historically we've seen people kind of move towards either communism after a dollar crash, which is scary, or they move towards free markets. And it usually goes towards communism because people feel helpless and want government to take care of them. And let's really hope that that doesn't happen. We have educating to do. But when it comes to the other angle at it, I mean, we could end up with an actual free market. Once the dollar crashes, we can build it up from a free market, free monetary standpoint, competing currencies, be able to, I mean, people often say, well, who's going to take a goat for, food? And I say, well, probably not that many people, but if the demand is there, they'll take it. Most people will resort to using gold, silver, cryptocurrencies that are decentralized in order to buy things. Because after all, I mean, it comes down to whatever the person you're trading with wants to consent to. It's as simple as, free voluntary transactions between two consenting individuals. So we don't need legal tender laws to know which currency is best. People will decide that for themselves via the hand of demand, which is just the demand of their dollar and what they want as individuals. So I don't think that's as bad of a system as a lot of people claim it is. But when it comes to the other side of it, of course, falling into communism, we will be on a collision course for many, many years and be entirely enslaved by government. So that is something that we have to continue to try and educate people against. So this all sounds very scary and fear-mongering, and I understand that. But the fact is, sometimes the truth ain't so positive, and we need to know it in order to set ourselves free. And the fact is, we've seen these fiat crashes hundreds of times, and just looking at those much smaller scale crashes and hyperinflation scenarios, we know that this gets messy. And if it's 1,000 times bigger than those occurrences, then we have something that is on an epic scale that we need to prepare for.
I agree. Yes. I agree, Josh. And it's so, like I said, it's so refreshing to hear the younger generation catch on to this. And I hope you do. I know you're educating people. I know you are. You have quite a few followers on your YouTube channel, subscribers, and bless you for that. I mean that. That's awesome. I feel very privileged to be able to have you come on tonight. I know that you have a busy schedule, and I don't want to keep you longer than you need to be. Is there any last-minute things you want to say to our listeners, though?
Absolutely. Just whenever you think you need something from government, look deep down into what that is you need and why the free market can actually provide a far better alternative. So everything from healthcare, well, the government gets involved and it inflates the price of the medicines perpetually, which means more money and then more inflation of the medications, no competition in the market, so therefore no innovation. There isn't any competition. So I think that with things like healthcare or things like insurance companies, or when it comes to the monetary system, or when it comes to the roads, I mean, the roads cost about, people say, well, what about my roads? Only about 0.5% on average of municipal budget actually goes towards the roads. That's not including the state and the federal budget. So that is minuscule. People can build the roads just fine. And when you look at when the government gets involved in, say, building a bathroom in a public park, they spend $2.5 million making a little thing with a few stalls in it. And then a private company does it for like $100,000 max. This is the difference. It's much more efficient. Right. And they have to depend on the value of their product and whether people want to keep going back to them, whereas government has no incentive to actually produce something of quality. So I would just say, make sure that you understand how valuable the individual is versus the collective, because the collective always has a different idea in some realms than you do, and they can coerce you and use force against you and lock you in a cage if you don't agree with them. And that goes for any individual out there that's listening. You need to stand as an individual, not as some giant collective that's going to coerce people because you think you know what's for the greater good of the greater number. So I would just say, finishing it off, you can find me at World Alternative Media. We got about 30,000 plus subscribers, always growing and trying to educate people as much as we can about the message of individual liberty, because in the end, the only person in life that you truly have control over is yourself. And without that, what's the point? That is the basis of life itself, is liberty. And I think that people need to take a hold of this liberty that they wield and use it for good, and use it because the government doesn't want you to use it. They want to take every last bit away from you, and liberty is what fuels your very life.
That's right. That is right. Beautiful, Josh. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Come on again anytime you want.
Happy to. Right. Thank you.
Okay.